Well, hello, that's me again. Today is April 17th, 2025. It is Thursday. And for people who love all kinds of the tactical gizmos and thingies and, gadgets, and in the beginning you can see yourself, it's, the regular use of the remote controlled devices. Some people call them robots. Yeah, they're sort of robots, but they're basically UAVs, if you wish. Well, it's not aerial, it's ground, UGVs, if you wish. And yeah, that's what they do. Russians use them all the time. Russian industry produces them in a very large quantities, and they come in and blow up whatever the stronghold of the, whatever is left of the Ukrainian armed forces. But before we go into any further elaboration on the situation here, let me start with a rather interesting thing. And I think that it is all coordinated. Because you have to understand, unlike the United States, where, well, it's got better a little bit, but still it's pretty bad, or some other politicians, where a bunch of other people, those, headless chicken running around, and everybody talks about their own aims, political aims and strategic aims, whatever you call them. In Russia, it is highly coordinated ballet, because Russia is a governable country, unlike it is the case, for example, with the European Union now. And when somebody says something, then it means what? Especially of the high political level, it is tightly coordinated through such places like Russia Security Council, and it means what? Mr. Putin, Mr. Medvedev, Mr. Patrushev, and everybody else are on the same page. And here is, for the last a few months, I've been going at it at, make no mistake, British political elites. I'm not against British people by any stretch of imagination. Fact is, as I already stated many times, I emphasize with them. I understand the tragedy of British people, and especially in terms of losing their country and living now in this nightmare of descending into the third world. Anybody who will try to, discuss or debate me on this, please, yeah, I'm ready. But elites is they are a complete different thing. And here we have no less than Russian Foreign Intelligence Service. And this is, well, imagine CIA comes out and, and says things of this nature. But Russians, they always kept their files, open, they, for themselves, of course. They attach new and new evidence, new and new files to this larger file. And what you have is this, which is rather fascinating. As you can see yourself, yesterday, Britain plays the main destructive role in Ukraine. The SVR, Russian Foreign, or Служба внешней разведки, the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service, said, analysts are not surprised by the leading destructive role of Great Britain in the Ukraine conflict. The British are encouraging the Kiev regime in every possible way, the Press Bureau of Foreign Intelligence Service of Russian Federation stated. And so they say the press bureau listed facts from history that testify to the borrowing by the Hitler regime from London ideas of genocide and about the British fomenting the Cold War between USSR and the United States. This is critical phrase. Suddenly Russians begin to separate United States from Great Britain. But historical truth is very simple. It might have been this ambitious and not very bright Truman who wanted the Cold War because he thought that he had the nuclear weapons. But it was obviously Mr. Churchill, frustrated by him being kicked out of the office by British people, and who went for his, good old Russophobia. And he went up with the, came up with the Fulton speech. And we know that was the start of the Cold War. So SVR continues to deliver this blow, so to speak, to British, and in this regards, so they say that The British encouraged the Kiev regime in every possible way, which praises the Punishers who fought on the side of Hitler, Bandera executioners, and today it itself commits numerous crimes against humanity, the statement said. That's interesting. Obviously, well, considering the fact that this is what I've been talking about. Well, I've been talking about this longer than several months, actually. I was writing about it for years, but, based on the commonality of my views, and then suddenly what the SVR states, some people say, oh yeah, he's, Russian asset, no, I'm not Russian asset, I'm US citizen, I love the United States, it's my home, but I'm very satisfied with the fact that even when you look again last time at the Kursk battle, number of the corpses of the mercenaries, you will see yourself that, British still, what outnumber American so-called mercenaries in Kursk district area, oblast, what have you. So, and this is critical in this respect, because obviously British played critical role. Not only that, I want to send everybody else to this magnificent book by David Eisenhower, which describes in detail the memorandum in Casablanca by none other than Stanley Embig, the chief of the Operation Planning Department for George Marshall. And he writes about the Primrose Path, how British were actually leading United States away from European theater of operations, trying to engage Americans in support of the imperial aspirations of British Empire. Again, make no mistake, I in no way, and it in no way detracts from the heroism and dedication of the British people who fought and at some point of time in 1941 stood alone against Nazi Germany. Granted that obviously that threat of the cross-channel invasion was largely exaggerated, but still, yeah, you have to admit, it's a heroism, it's national, steadfastness, and even the Churchill speech at that time, we will fight it in the air, on the beaches, and all that. It's a great example of their statesman rhetoric. But, this is what it is. British today, and in the last, well, since probably, Anglo-Argentinian conflict around Falklands, they are what they are. They are pretty much only capable of terrorism, and their armed forces. It's pathetic, really. You know what? And I don't want to go there anymore. But this is what they do. They cannot live with the fact that they are nobodies anymore. So, and the only thing they can do is to order terrorism. All kind of the sabotage, things of this nature. That's the level of the modern Great Britain or United Kingdom rather. So, and this is very interesting when SVR, or Foreign Intelligence Services of Russia, starts this very specific distinguishment, if you or distinguishing, if you wish, between United States in this particular case and United Kingdom. And well, there are other things which, of course, have to keep our attention focused here, and this is this. And yeah, that's, well, you know what, it just on and on and on. The same. Reuters informs that EU shelves idea of sanctions on Russian LNG imports yesterday. Reuters, no less. Well, what does it mean? So Reuters goes and elaborates on this matter, and this is very funny. Obviously, it's not related to United Kingdom, but guess what? Behind most of the insane European politicians, you will have the ears protruding of the MI6 and CIA. So they are all blackmailed, and many of them are genuine articles. So European officials have dropped the idea of pushing for a ban on the bloc's Russian liquefied natural gas imports in upcoming packages, because of resistance from some governments and uncertainty about alternative sources, EU officials said. Well, EU officials and alternative sources, EU officials are alternatively gifted people. And obviously, everybody who anybody who ever studied basic physics and what energy is, they understand all those alternative sources is a complete ideological construct and a BS. And of course, it's not an uncertainty. They are incapable of providing at this stage, with the exception of the nuclear power, proper supply of energy. Considering the fact that European Union has no resources, and what do you expect, they suddenly want still to continue to buy Russian liquefied natural gas. But again, this will not last. And as you saw yourself, especially in terms of the attitude the SVR exhibited towards Great Britain or United Kingdom, if you wish, Russians are not well predisposed, to communicate and cooperate with this crop of the European politicians. And so the Commission is expected to propose a 17th package of sanctions on Russia by June, though officials say work on the measures is moving slowly. Well, they want to disengage themselves by 2027 from Russian energy. Russians say, go ahead, just we have enough popcorn here, and we'll see how this will go. We know how this will go. And this is the basic scientific, so to speak, framework for all that. And this brings us to some things which, when I say that, the combined West is defeated, and before I go into discussing other subject matter, so to speak, I want to remind you the very famous phrase by Karl Marx, that history repeats itself first as the tragedy and then as a farce. I think so we're on this third stage, or the farce stage. And before we go, let me remind you something which is very important, and this will explain to you what we are dealing with. And again, anybody who will tell me that Americas, there are many people, they are anti-American, and they go out and they continue with this, Americans never landed on the moon, or American technology sucks. No, military technology, for the most part, sucks. Not all of it, but most of it, especially ground forces and air defense, it sucks. But you cannot deny the American industrial genius, engineering genius. You cannot deny that Boeing for years have been a magnificent representation of American technological engineering and industrial genius. American cars, well, let me tell you, between European cars and American cars, guess what? I will choose American car. And there is a reason for that. They are better. Their engines are better today. Not 30 years ago, but today they are better. And then we can sit here and go on and on with the computers and microchips and things like that. American technological contribution to the world is massive. It's huge. And anybody who tells me that, space programs, yes, Americans are not the number one in terms of the manned space exploration, but in terms of the unmanned space exploration, it's magnificent. It's without rivals, actually. It's a stunning space program. So Russians and Chinese are now kind of trying to get deeper into space. They will. But here it is. This is American technological and engineering genius. Nobody ever tried to diminish it. Russians, Soviets, even during the Cold War times, they were just admitting some things which have been magnificent. And let me remind you, in 2020, MIT, no less, the director or president of MIT, they were celebrating on the 75th anniversary of this famous speech by Vannevar Bush and the paper, actually, The Endless Frontier, the next 75 years in science. And they talk about who Vannevar Bush was, and I will explain to you who he was. And they talk about huge honor to celebrate the 75-year-old paper. Today it's 80 years now old. And they say, with most other audiences mentioning The Endless Frontier might sound like a Star Trek reference, but all of us here understand that this 1945 report was the founding document of the US scientific enterprise. And yes, Russians understand who Vannevar Bush. They understand his significance. And let's go and take a look at who Vannevar Bush was. And when you begin to understand that the man was a genius, and so, well, let's go. Even Wikipedia gives us a very good insight into this genius. Well, guess what? He was an American engineer, inventor, and science administrator who during World War II headed the U.S. Office of Scientific Research and Development. He was chiefly responsible for the movement that led to the creation of the National Science Foundation. Bush joined the Department of Electrical Engineering at MIT in 1919. And after that, you can see yourself, he became the vice president of MIT and dean of the MIT School of Engineering. So during his career, Bush patented a string of his own inventions. And of course, we talk about analog computers, differential analyzer, differential equations, which they could solve differential equation with as many 18 independent variables. And offshoot of the work at MIT by Bush and others was the beginning of the digital circuit design theory, the MEMEX, which has begun developing in 1930, heavily influenced by Emanuel Goldberg's statistical machine, and so on and on and on. And when you look at this guy, yeah, he was the founder of the company which became today known as Raytheon. And yeah, there are a number of the products of Raytheon. As much as we laugh at it today, it was a great company. It was very advanced. And so as you can see yourself, here is this scientific genius given this speech in 1945, understanding that the United States after World War II was sitting on the top of the world when the rest of the world was essentially, laying in ruins. And he created this doctrine, the theory of the scientific development of the United States. Well, and now going back to Mr. Marx and his, history repeats itself as the tragedy and then as a farce. Well, 80 years later, essentially, we have the 2025. We have this guy, Mr. Director of the same thing, essentially. So the remarks by Director Kratzos at the Endless Frontier Retreat. Okay, whatever. The golden age of American innovation. So here it is, 80 years later. It's through the White House. And here is what he stated in April 14, 2025. As you can see yourself, there's a lot of references to Vannevar Bush, critical paper. And they try to this Director Kratzos guy tries to be, Vannevar Bush of sorts. And then you can read this text. There's a lot of, those hot button, so to speak, words, all those proper, tropes about America and China, of course, stealing, which, by the way, in many respects, true, United States, especially, in 1990s and 2000s, basically gave up its industry and technological expertise to China. But, well, so here where Mr. Kratzos talks about this thing, and he kind of, but here is the point. When you thought that this was kind of funny, here comes this thing. And many people already paid attention to it, and you can hear Homeric laughter, for example, in Russia and elsewhere, and even in the United States, that when Mr. Kratzos states that our technologies permit us to manipulate time and space, they have distance annihilated, cause things to grow, and improve productivity. You know what? I don't know how to comment on this, honestly, because, well, evidently, if he's talking about manipulation of time and space, I hope he's not talking about this, and about the backspace thing, because back rooms, because back rooms ended very badly, as you understand, and they try to manipulate time and space, but I don't know. obviously United States, nobody has technologies which can manipulate time. The people can manipulate space. Do you know how manipulated space is called? It's called transportation. And obviously it could be not only transportation, it could be weapons. For example, hypersonic weapons, they also manipulate space. They get you from the point A to the point B. But so they leave distance annihilated, cause things to grow, and improve productivity. Okay, I surrender. I'm pretty sure if Mr. Vannevar Bush lived today and he would read this speech, he would be absolutely terrified by the, well, intellectual level, or rather lack thereof. And you know what? Let's take a look at, you saw yourself what is the curriculum vitae of Vannevar Bush. Let's take a look at who Mr. Kratsios is. Okay. Michael John Katsakos Kratsios is an American business executive and government official who has served as the 13th director of the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy and science advisor to the president since 2025. Okay, so let's take a look who this science technology advisor guy is. He studied in Princeton University and graduated with bachelor's in politics and certificate in Hellenic studies in 2008. Okay, that's fine. Kratsios completed a 125-page long senior thesis titled Economics and Voting in the Third Hellenic Republic, an aggregate and individual level analysis of the Greek electorate. So I think he's, you know what, he is totally qualified to be the science and technology advisor guy because he completed, you know what, he has degree in Hellenic studies, and nothing wrong with Hellenic studies per se, and, you know, the Western world is the hair of the Hellenic civilization, and those, you know, great thinkers, mathematicians, and what have you, Pythagoras comes to mind, you know, so I don't know how to comment on this, but this is a complete farce, and then that explains to you why this guy believes that the United States has the technology to manipulate space and time. I think he watched too much of the Back to the Future, evidently, but you know what? I don't have enough, so to speak, you know, human, spiritual, or emotional power to comment on this anymore. And when we talk about what is going on overall, including from the, you know, point of view of the special military operation, we have to remember one very important thing. And I want, it also comes back, harks back, so to speak, to actually, you know, this robot and the talk of the Vannevar Bush and the whole other host of issues related to what we see today in terms of the declining of the combined West and the fact that United States has been exposed militarily incompetent in every single way. And guess what? If you go and take a listen to yesterday, or 2 days, to Judge Napolitano with the Colonel McGregor, and he talks about Zelensky and Neocons reject peace. And then you can see yourself timestamp, if you wish, or time point, which is around 16 minutes. And here Douglas McGregor makes this incredibly important admission, of which I've been writing and speaking since pretty much the beginning of the special military operation. And he talks about that somebody gives him a call in the first week of April 2022. That's that week, remember, where actual start of special military operation, well, in earnest. Before that, it was a different thing, but yeah, it was in first week of April 2022 when Biden administration and their puppet Boris Johnson, they essentially sabotaged the Istanbul negotiations between Russia and Ukraine. And Colonel says that actually the voice from Mar-a-Lago calls him. And we understand what kind of voice from Mar-a-Lago calls him. And Colonel explains to him that actually it's a catastrophe for Ukraine and, you know, as I've been writing for 10 years, Europe and United States. And the voice from Mar-a-Lago, obviously we know who this voice is. He is the President of the United States today, who, by the way, bypassed his friend Colonel McGregor with offering him any serious position where he would be needed in the United States. But that's the separate matter. And he tells him that, But everybody in Washington says that Ukraine is winning. Ukraine is going to beat Russia. And yeah, this is basically a catastrophe for Russians. And Colonel says, no, it's not. It's absolutely the other way around. But, and this is a very important testament to understanding of this catastrophe which descended upon Washington, and why Washington finds itself in the position it is today, when even President Trump admits sometimes in this, lucid moments that, Putin has all cards on his hands. And here comes this, I'm going to remind you something for you to understand why this table, it's for today. As you can see yourself, April 17th, you can see the dynamics of the losses of the armed forces of Ukraine, and they continue to launch all those UAVs, 204 today. Most of them are intercepted by Russian air defense at Russian civilian objects. It's terrorism. That's pretty much London. That's MI6. That's the only thing they are good at. And so what can I say? I want to remind you again how simple things and how what Vannevar stated when talking about the technological and scientific development. I will remind you, I did the video about it separately, but again, we're going back to Mr. Lester Grau. And here it is. Lester Grau, PhD, he is a colonel of the US Army, Mr. Clean Rich. Russian tactical correlation of forces means computations updated for modern equipment and capabilities. This was in 2021. This is extremely important article. And you know what, for people who understand what is the scaling up or scaling down, there is the Pareto distribution, which allows you in many respects to scale up or scale down from tactical level to operational and back. It all depends how you look at this. There is a whole host of the scientific works by, for example, people from the Academy of the General Staff of Russia. So, and what they talk about, Grau talks about, this is, again, I'm reminding you about this. You can go back and find my video specifically dedicated to this, that Russians have a long history of developing the mathematical determination of combat. And so it goes back to Russian mathematicians, great mathematicians of the 19th century, and they are talking about the methodologies, quantitative methods, and mathematical models to support decision making on all command levels, including tactical one. Well, for example, obviously the commanding officer of brigade is the highest tactical level. Obviously, he needs a very extensive staff to prepare him all proper justifications to come up with his what is called commanding decision. And if anybody thinks that, he is the guy sitting on the horse, looking at those guns firing, here and there, and then makes, let's charge. Now, that doesn't work like this, actually. You need to write your commanding decision, and you know what? You have to analyze it, talking to a chief of staff and his operation planning department. These are people who operate numbers non-stop, and those people who served as the commanding officers at some tactical level. So, and if we go further, we can see yourself that this is the critical point, which we have to say, again, make no mistake, these are old, despite the fact that it's 2021. They take up old numbers from Belarusian actually Ministry of Defense, and it's calculations for example, in terms of the correlation of forces and means are done for in this particular case for armor based on the T-72A tank, which was the first model of the T-72 tank. And they talk about combat effectiveness, combat potential of weapons. And again, COFM and decision and what is called the required force are somewhat different. It doesn't mean, for example, if you have M1 Abrams, which at that time was counted as let's take M1A1 Abrams against T-72A, which is 1.87. Let's round it by 2. So if you think that, in this case, you will have have to have two T-72As against one Abrams. No, it doesn't work like this. But it is very important stepping stone, for example, when it gives you the understanding of how you have to relate those things when you do your initial analysis. Before you go into the calculation, that's what staffs do of the required force for this or the other type of the operations, tactical action, for example, let alone when you go and do things on the level of the division, God forbid, for Army Corps, let alone the general staff. So, but it gives you understanding of that, and this is very critical because all those tables today, they are irrelevant. You know why? Because obviously we have now statistical data, which is of course those differential equations, those analysis, what the staffs do of the special military operation, and you know what? That's what we need to admit. American, let alone other NATO, British, oh my gosh, Challenger, tanks, it's a joke. So they have been completely discredited. They performed dismally, and they provided no tangible effect on the battlefield, even on the tactical level. And the tactical level, we're talking about the level of the company or battalion. And when you talk about Vannevar Bush, who gave this great push to American scientific development in the post-World War II time, Russians were not sitting on their hands, so to speak. They've been listening, they've been reading. Well, guess what? Russians have their own thing going, and they always had. And that will need to be discussed separately, especially when you talk about the famous Admiral Rickover's quip, when he spoke that the main threat to the American national security is the Russian public school, Soviet public school. And it remains today absolutely true in every single respect, and especially so in military field. And that ties in extremely well with what Vannevar Bush and Russians do, and what Vannevar Bush did, what Russians do today, and they were doing this before, and how Great Britain, or United Kingdom, if you wish, found itself in the bottom of the civilizational pit, basically leading the Western civilization down the, into the dumpster, and why it happened so. And it all together is related. It's all pertinent to each other and relevant. And this is what I wanted to tell you guys today about. And in conclusion, as always, those who like what I do, please subscribe to my channel. And those who can afford, please support me on Patreon, or buy me a coffee and two. That will allow me to continue to do what I am doing. So have a nice weekend coming to you, and I'll talk to you later, guys. Bye-bye.